one picture I've drawn before is just one to sort of think about what it is that faculty members do. And so one axis here is sort of research to practice. And then another axis, and it's not really an axis, it's just sort of categories, it's sort of disciplinary work, interdisciplinary or post-disciplinary work, and then work around changing engineering education, which I think is maybe a separate category given Olin's mission around engineering education. What are the transitions that you've made and how you think of yourself in the space outside of the classroom, maybe?
So I'm kind of somewhere between research and practice, and flipping back and forth between the two, and somewhere between maybe the post-disciplinary. I'm still very interested in interdisciplinary teaching and learning and what that means for students.
You have a real research focus in that area.
Yeah, that was kind of where the research got started, and then has since sort of pushed more towards changing engineering education, more towards practice over time.
And certainly I started out down here, right? I was doing work on design of a very specific type of transistor. It was electrical engineering work, and it was very much research work. It was the type of stuff that I would be submitting journal articles for. And sort of over time, I've actually shifted much more into this space, where I'm interested in how do you change engineering education, and I'm mostly interested in that with a sort of boots on the ground perspective. This is the RMP picture, right? That if you think about how an institution traditionally talks about what the job of a faculty member is, right? There are 3 bins. There's the teaching bin, the research bin, and the service bin, right? And as a faculty member, your responsibility is to fill up the teaching bin to some level, right? That level depends on what the institution is about. To fill up the research bin to some level, again, depends on for most institutions, this bin should be higher, right? And then the service bin, often the objective is to keep that as small as possible, right?
Yeah.
And I think that in some ways, I think that is kind of the mental model that Olin started with, and but then part of why making the transition to this has been painful is because at the end of the day, everyone has thought, well yeah, but what about my research bin? Well, how do I deal with that? So that this sort of transition to thinking about the things that faculty members do as being kind of an overlapping Venn diagram, where one of the things that we do is develop students, right? Which is not just teaching. There's a lot of other really important things that happen. In fact, I think in a lot of cases, most of the development of students doesn't have to do directly with teaching. It has indirectly to do with it. There's a lot of service is kind of in a way, not a great word, right? But the sort of idea that all of us are engaged in building the college, and then somehow making a difference sort of outside of Olin, so having some kind of external impact.
Because these are 3 separate buckets, right?
Yep.
And I don't even think there's a pipe, because I think in a lot of places, bizarrely enough, it's a little bit more like this. And I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but that's research.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's cute.
Teaching and service.
Right, so if you
And
happen
a lot
to
of
fill up the
places,
research bin, then
You
you
got
get
to
to.
fill up the research bin and what spills over.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of places maybe like that a little bit, or maybe it's all shifting, but this is so much more deliberate about it.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that this picture is often one that's justified when people talk about well, you need to be current in your field in order to be teaching your field, right? Well, why is that? That's premised on this sort of expert picture of being a faculty member, right? The only way that you can possibly teach this is if you know all the things that are there to be taught. But in fact, I think our experience is, no matter how much of an expert you are, there are going to be real world problems that students are going to encounter that we don't know about, and it's much more important that we prepare them to deal with those kinds of problems than to just pour the knowledge that we have in our heads into theirs.
Early on, if you drew a set of axes that were, say, internal to external, and short-term to long-term impacts, I was hired when I was operating very much internally. How can I create a research environment for a handful of undergraduates that would be meaningful to them and maybe get them to a good graduate school with really kind of short-term outcomes. There was no real vision there. There was the incremental research challenge, like how do I take this material system I'm working on and make it 10% better by adding this little thing, that was the kind of thinking that I was up to when I was first hired. And now I would say I'm very much most of the work I do is much more externally facing, and much more focused on long-term challenges, these big complex things that are going to take some time to address.